Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the World Radio Day that we are celebrating on our GETI Talks. My name is Shilpi, and I'm the Relationship Manager with the Global Education and Training Institute. I have a Miss Alisha Syedain, who is supposed to be Syedain. Sorry, I mispronounced your name. And she's the assistant professor at Amity School of Communication. And she's also pursuing her PhD in theater and faculty of electronic media. So she will continue, as we started at 4 o'clock with Miss Hina Adib about how radio has contributed to drama and art. She will also continue in the same topic, but her subtopic or the topic that she's going to discuss on the World Radio Day is that the changing paradigms of radio, how radio in itself, like we used to hear with Bharti earlier, there was only one channel and there were certain kind of programs which were set. But now we have different programs on radio which are more interesting, right? Apart from simple, the radio playing songs for you or an interview or just casting the news, there's more to it. So that is what Alisha is going to talk about. So thank you, Alisha, for joining us and also joining the disruptive education movement started by Dr. Sunita Gandhi. It's over to you.
You're welcome, Shilpi. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Thanks for the lovely introduction. First of all, I would like to wish a very happy World Radio Day to everybody. And I would also like to thank Dr. Sunita Gandhi, ma'am, for starting this movement and for giving an opportunity to all the education leaders and the students and the professors who can come here and talk about the topics that are basically very important in shaping our lives and connecting all of us together. So thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Team Getty, for giving this opportunity to me, as today is World Radio Day, and we will basically be talking about the importance of radio in our lives. Because radio is one medium that is basically connecting a large number of audiences. Basically, it's a mass communication medium reaching the widest number of audiences in the world. And as today is the Radio Day, which everybody knows, and there's a little story behind that. In 2011, the Director General of UNESCO basically decided and basically shared with everybody that this day could be celebrated as Radio Day, because this day also happens to be the anniversary of UN Radio. So the topic that I'm going to talk about today is changing paradigms in radio industry. Radio industry has been changing widely over a period of time. So, just to begin with, let us first discuss about radio as a medium. Now, this is an audio only medium we're talking about. We don't have a visual treat on radio. And that's what makes radio very special, because radio is considered to be the most imaginative mass communication medium. Now, why imaginative? Now, this is a medium on which, whether you take on the part of a speaker or you take other part of the listener, both really need to be very creative and imaginative, because radio paints pictures. We need to be visually very descriptive when we talk on radio. And now, talking about radio as a medium, people say it's an active medium, it's a live medium. But what makes radio more interesting that it is an active yet passive medium? Now, what do I mean by that? For radio, you don't really need to keep all your senses active. I mean, you can just relax, you can lie down and listen to radio. A person can be cooking and listening to the radio. A person can be driving and listening to the radio. So, talking about the listeners of the radio, they don't really need to consume all their senses together in order to access radio and the content. Now, radio is also considered to be the most widely accepted lifestyle driven medium. Now, lifestyle, basically, people say that the majority of the radio listeners tune into radio while they're driving. So if you're driving to your work, you can listen to the radio. As in, you're driving, you're focusing on the road, and simultaneously, radio acts as a companion to an individual when you are, say, cooking, or an elderly citizen or a senior citizen who is above 60, retired, sitting at home, sipping morning tea with radio. So basically, it also contributes to be more of a personalized medium. People say that radio is talking to millions. At the same time, radio is talking to you directly. So it's basically a personalized medium. It's an individual medium, because everybody feels that the RJ or the presenter is directly addressing them. Now, radio is also considered to be an economical medium. because for accessing radio we don't really need a subscription, we don't really need internet connectivity, talking about traditional radio. And all we need is a radio device or probably a phone that has an inbuilt radio. So yeah, it is a very cost effective medium that way. Now, I know a lot of times when people explain theories and inventions and discoveries, that becomes quite boring for some people. But it is very important for us to also understand where radio is coming from, and the journey that the radio has incorporated over a period of these years. That the basic development of radio, the invention of radio, started in early 1800. That was the time when wireless telegraphy was getting started, and it was basically various experiments were conducted on understanding the power of radio waves and the electromagnetic waves, to basically using the principle of induction and basically transmitting through space. So that was basically the time when discovery of radio was happening, and various mathematical experiments were getting conducted. And people, definitely, when we talk about the invention of the radio, the credit goes to Italian inventor Galileo Marconi. But then there is a whole list of people who have contributed in the development of radio. I mean, we cannot ignore Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell. He was the first person to basically conduct a mathematical experiment on electromagnetic waves. So now this experiment, and because of this experiment today, radio broadcasting and radio transmission has become possible, because that was for the first time it was observed that basically the waves can carry messages. Waves can carry sound signals that can be propagated through free space. And then German physicist Heinrich Rudolf Hertz basically demonstrated a rapid variations of electric current that could be projected into space in the form of radio waves like those of light and heat, and that could carry audio messages. So there was this huge movement that was going on. And even when we talk about the contributions of the early investors and early people who are basically acknowledged with the development of radio, we cannot even forget the name of Jagdish Chandra Bose, because he was there conducting experiments with Rudolf Hertz, with William Crookes, Nikola Tesla, Alexander Popo. Now, these people were conducting experiments and using engineering and using the principles of physics to basically make it possible so that sound waves can be traveled through space. And then, when wireless telegraphy became possible, that was the invention of radio, which basically goes to Italian inventor Galileo Marconi, who basically developed a commercially successful wireless telegraphy system for radio transmission. And it was happening, so it took from almost 1830 to 1894. It almost took a lot of time for getting the radio into its being today. And when we talk about the development of radio in the world, and when we talk about the development or the origin of radio in India, it has almost happened at the same time. Because of the contributions from Jagdish Chandra Bose, basically radio in India started in early 1900s. And that was exactly the time when radio was new in the entire world. Because Jagdish Chandra Bose came to India, and it started with, when the development of All India Radio was happening. And in 1936, All India Radio came into being. Now, talking about types of radio platforms, because when we talk about radio, people, today's generation, they don't really understand All India Radio. And the generation who are basically active listeners of All India Radio, they don't really understand commercial radio, which is the private FM. So basically, it is very important for our audiences to understand that what are the different platforms which are available for radio broadcasting versus narrowcasting also, because online radio follows a slightly different principle, which we'll come to in few seconds. Now, talking about institutional radio is the national public radio broadcaster. Say, for example, in India, All India Radio. For example, in London, British Broadcasting Service. So basically, this is the government radio that we're talking about. So for example, in India, All India Radio was established in 1936 as an autonomous government organization. Now, this comes under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Now, this is an autonomous body. For example, now this body makes rules and regulations for all the other types of radio platforms to exist in any country. Now we have commercial radio, which is the private FM radio broadcasting. Now it's in India, it started in 2001. And even if we look at the global scenario, in late 1900s was the time when private FM started all around the globe. And in India, Radio City was the first FM station in India, which was started in Bangalore. Now, this private FM, when we talk about, now this is a commercial radio model. And this model works on the principle of generating its own income, because when you talk about institutional radio, I mean, you have government giving funds to the institutional radio. So basically talking about the existing of an institutional radio is governed by the government. Now commercial radio has to basically sustain itself into the market by depending on the models like advertising and getting sponsors and using RJ mentions and doing outside events in order to earn money and run its industry. Now there is a third kind of radio, which is a very interesting format of a radio, which is called as community radio. Now, community radio, as people say, it acts as a bridge between institutional radio and commercial radio. And the very being of community radio came into its existence because it was felt that there is something missing when we talk about from the perspective of institutional radio and commercial radio. For example, institutional radio we say is autonomous body. Institutional radio is a government body, but government body is not accessible to common man. Now, say for example, there is a farmer somewhere in Punjab and he wants to access, he wants to come on radio. Maybe he wants to talk about the process through which he is doing his farming. Now, he cannot come, very easily. He cannot come on institutional radio, though they do. Vivid Bharati do programs like Krishi Vigyan and all, but then that is for a specific slot. So there was a need that was felt that institutional radio is not accessible to common human being. And as far as commercial radio is concerned, commercial radio basically works banks on the principle of profit maximization. So certainly it is not available to common man, common human being, because they hire really professional people to talk on radio. So that way there was a need felt that, though we say that the purpose of radio is creating awareness, though the purpose of radio is giving voice to people, however both of these radios were not actually doing the function of giving voice to all the voiceless community. So that gave birth to community radio. That the objective of community radio is basically by the people, of the people, for the people, so that it is for a local community. It is for a local community. Even if a person who wants to basically give an announcement of his daughter's wedding can actually come on community radio and talk about that. It is for people who wants to talk about social issues. They want to talk about they want to tell a joke, they want to talk about anything funny, they want to just basically come and sing their folk song. I mean, it is available to anybody and everybody. That was the purpose of community radio. And Anna FM was the first campus based community radio, which was established in 2004. And Sangam Radio by Deccan Education Society, by an NGO, was established in 2008. So these two are considered as the first ever community radios. Now, talking about online radio. Now, online radio is digital audio service transmission. Basically, online radio follows a slightly different principle of communicating the sound messages, because when we speak about institutional radio or the commercial radio or the community radio, all of these use the broadcasting principle, where electromagnetic waves are transferred from a point and then they reach to the receivers. And these waves are basically then converted into sound signals, and the sound signals are further converted into audio messages, and then it reaches through the principle of broadcasting. However, online radio use internet for casting its messages. So basically, online radio uses the principle of webcasting. And there is a further different concept which is called as narrowcasting, which was given birth by the beginning of the web radio, which we'll be shortly discussing. Some radio stations like TuneIn Radio, Worldwide FM, and Pandora Radio of United States of America are very popular online radios in the world. Radio Umang since 2000 was the first radio station in India, which is an online radio. Now, talking about these radio platforms and also discussing an interesting concept of broadcasting versus narrowcasting. And because this talks about the most important paradigm shift in the radio industry. Because when we talk about institutional radio, now it follows the principle of public service. The main objective of institutional radio is because it says Bahujan Hitai and Bahujan Sukhai, which means benefit of all and happiness of all. Because since 1957, All India Radio's official on air name is Akashwani, which is voice from the sky. So, the purpose of All India Radio is edutainment, infotainment, creating awareness, giving people the news, giving them sports commentary. And that is why news and sports commentary are exclusive right of institutional radio in India, which means no private FM can, deliver news, no private FM can deliver sports commentary. Because obviously, when they want to keep some kinds of listenership to themselves, they'll have to keep certain exclusivity, which is not there for commercial radio. Now, commercial radio follows more popular mediums like RJ Talks, like radio dramas, like radio interviews, and phone ins, and various campaigns. And now they basically have to follow the rules and regulations set up by the institutional radio. They pay a license fee, and they even have to pay basically, they will have to play the public service announcements, which is basically Janhit Mein Jari messages on commercial radio free of cost, because that is a service, that is like a CSR these commercial radios do. And then because they basically have to maximize their profit, they focus on the principle of entertainment, and also they play contemporary hit music, as in they pay the latest music, because the latest music is what youth is listening today. And commercial radios are basically targeting the youth and the working class, and they earn through their advertisements. So when you actually listen to, say, Radio Mirchi or Fever FM or Red FM, we often think that, for example, if you look at 1 hour of radio, say 60 minutes, you can probably divide it in a way, saying you'll be feeling that, the RJ would be speaking for 13-14 minutes, the the songs would be playing for 30-40 minutes, and then for 15-20 minutes straight away you'll have lots bunch and bunch of ads coming. And we normally think that, these kinds of ads and these number of huge ads, we do not actually listen on Vivid Bharati. That's because commercial radios are earning through these ads. These ads are the income generators for a commercial radio. Now, community radio works on the principle of NGO funding. It works on the principle of charity. Like NGOs, they generate their funds, they have funders, they have investors, they have sponsors. Similarly, community radio works. Now, when you talk about community radio, it has a very limited range also. Now, these community radios are also run by NGOs and various campuses. For example, Jamia has Radio Jamia, and then in Lucknow there is CMS Radio, and then you also have a very popular community radio like Gurgaon Ki Awaaz and Radio Mewat in Rajasthan, which basically talks about women rights. So community radio focuses on developmental issues. It is a democratic form of radio, and it basically focuses on social issues and the problem any specific community is facing. So those problems are basically addressed on community radios. Talking about online radio, and where we basically talk about the principle of narrowcasting, because all the above three radio platforms that I have mentioned basically follow broadcasting techniques, which means the radio signals are broadcasted through electromagnetic waves. Now, online radio follows the principle of narrowcasting. Now, it is very simple for us to understand the principle of narrowcasting today, because we have so many online streaming platforms. Say, for example, Netflix, you have Amazon Prime. Now, when you watch TV, that is broadcasting. When you access content on Netflix, that is narrowcasting. Similarly, when you listen to, say, Radio Mirchi, or when you're sitting in your cab or your car, that is broadcasting. When you're actually listening to online radio, wherein you are going to a website, you are clicking on the URL of Pandora Radio, or, for example, BBC London, you're clicking on it and you're accessing content. That principle is called as narrowcasting, because you are accessing the content based upon your own demands. So that follows the principle of webcasting, and it uses internet for transmitting of the messages. Now, the reason why this paradigm shift towards online medium has become so popular, because you see institutional radio, Vivid Bharati, it has its website online. I mean, we see Prime Minister Narendra Modi talking to the audiences, talking to the listeners through his show Man Ki Baat, which comes online. Now we see these private FMs also, they're all doing shows online as well. They have their websites, updated websites, they are run live. And we see even the traditional broadcasting platforms like institutional radio or commercial radio or community radio are now choosing to shift towards the online medium. Now, when we talk about the paradigm shift in the radio industry, it is basically going online. And the reasons behind that, there are a few reasons that basically talk about this shift, this change. First is that now you have easy internet connectivity thanks to Geo and various 4G and 5G connectivity that we have today. So internet connectivity is there, and that this internet connectivity has basically boosted the shift towards the online medium. And everybody in India today have a smartphone. So smartphone accessibility is second reason which has basically boosted this shift. And radio has adapted as a lifestyle driven medium. So people today, they are very specific about their choices. They exactly know what they want, and they want to listen to the content that they actually like. For example, there is this person who is very health conscious. Now they would probably like to listen to an health oriented program. Somebody who basically is more inclined towards social issues would probably want to listen that kind of a program. And this option you don't really have in the broadcasting today. I mean, for example, if you're playing Radio Mirchi, whatever is coming on Radio Mirchi, a listener would have to listen to that. But in case of online radio, you have this particular option. Now podcasting opportunities have also made online radio very popular. Now I shall be shortly discussing about the podcasting opportunities. And there is one more reason, which means you can get access to on demand content and the latest music, because today youth is following the pop culture music. And this pop culture music is extremely and easily accessible on internet today. And when you talk about the internet radios, there are radio stations which are basically divided, or which are basically categorized on the basis of the music that they're offering. So that gives you a further a choice to the listeners out there. And you have global access of content on online radio. I mean, because since the radio follows the principle of frequency and range and all of that, so that way when you basically talk about the online radio mechanism, you can access global content. And you, for listeners, they can get global content. And for the for the presenters, for the people who are running an online radio, they are able to get listeners globally. They are able to access global listeners. So for the person who is producing the content, and for the person who is listening to the content and accessing to the content, this act as a win-win deal for both the parties here. Now, for example, we also talk about the latest trend, the latest paradigm change in the radio industry today, that everybody is starting a podcast. I mean, today you want to talk about a certain topic, you feel strongly about any topic, you want to talk about health, you want to talk about lifestyle related stuff, you want to talk about fashion, you want to talk about food. There is anything that you like and that interests you, you can start your own podcast and you can have listeners. I mean, that's such an amazing opportunity today, and that has made online radio very popular. Because say for example, the process of starting your own podcast is as simple as downloading a podcasting app. Just for an example, I've taken Anchor app here. I mean, there are various apps available out there, in the Play Store. You can just go and download a podcasting app. You can think about a topic of your choice, a topic that interests you, a topic that you think you have knowledge on. And then you can organize your thoughts on a piece of paper. You can write down the points you want to talk about. Language is not a barrier. I mean, people are communicating in Hindi and getting amazing listeners. People are communicating in English and getting amazing listeners. People are communicating in their regional languages and getting amazing listeners. And people are even using this new term, which is Hinglish, which is Hindi English mix today. So you can just organize your thoughts on a piece of paper. You can ideate, conceptualize the program you want to talk about. You can do a rehearsal and then you can record it. And you can do very basic editing, which is available in these apps inbuilt as an inbuilt option. You can finish and you can upload. And now these can be synced with your Instagram. You can sync it with your Facebook. You can sync it with various social media platforms, and then you have access. People all around the globe will have access to your content. People, students and college going students and school going students, they are earning, they are becoming influencers, and they're running their podcast and they're influencing lives today. Now see, whenever we talk about radio, there are various fields. When you actually want to work in the radio industry today, it is a very lucrative industry and it has a lot of job opportunities. Normally most widely discussed is radio jockey, but that's not the only field that we can be in. There are various other opportunities and job roles in radio today. I mean, obviously you can become a radio jockey. Radio jockey is like the face of the radio. That is why radio jockeys are extremely popular with youth today, because they act as a face. So they are face of the radio station. You have radio producers. Producers are the people who plan the entire program, the content. What would be the timetable of the radio, what would be the itinerary, what program would play when, and what kind of programs you want to plan. And then we have radio creative writers. Now these writers, they write jingles, they're writing spots. Spots is basically it's the technical term for advertisements on radio. So they're writing ads, and definitely we have discussed that ads for a radio is extremely important, because that's how the commercial radio is earning today. So they are earning through ads. So you can be a creative writer, you can write radio programs, radio stories, you can be a storyteller on radio. So you can write all those types of creative programs if you feel that, okay, speaking is not for me, but maybe I can write. So even you have a profile called as a creative writer on radio. Then you can, if you're from the audio engineering side, and you can plan programming and engineering and editing, because a broadcasting engineer is definitely required in a radio station, and a team of it. There is a team required from the people who basically do broadcasting and programming and engineering and all the technical things. And and then, of course, we have business developers, because talking about institutional radio, self-sufficient, getting money from the government, but when we basically address commercial radio, they have to develop their business. So how do they develop their business? They get clients, they have to get ads, they have to get RJ mentions, they do online events. We see they basically sponsor programs like award shows, and basically various events. So basically, commercial radio definitely needs a business development manager, because you develop business for your radio station. And you also have a marketing and a client servicing team. And when you have existing clients, existing customers, you need to cater to them. You have to see what your creative writer is doing, whether they have written a script for your client, and you need to be the face to the client, and you need to tell them whether they like the particular idea or not. Sometimes your client likes a very simple idea, and does not understand an extremely complex creative idea. So basically, client servicing team is a bridge. They act like a bridge between the creative team and the client side. Now, talking about the qualities required to be a radio presenter, because most of all, whenever I teach radio, also students, first year students, second year students, you tell them various opportunities that radio has, but then all they are interested in understanding how to become a radio jockey, and how to be a presenter on radio, or how to be a storyteller on radio. So there are certain qualities, there are certain attributes that are required to become a good radio presenter or a good radio jockey. For example, first of all, for starters, you need to be extremely casual and conversational. Now, when I say casual, what does it mean? When I say casual, I mean you need to be cool, you need to be conversational, you need to be interactive, to basically talk on radio. Because if you're talking in an extremely boring format, nobody would like to listen to you. And even if it is broadcasting, say for example Radio Mirchi, immediately the listener will change the channel to say Red FM, and probably access different music. So in order to hook the listener to the radio station, that they are listening to you, they're telling what you are saying, and you were telling a stories, and then they are really interested in that particular story. For that, you need to be conversational and interactive, because we have discussed that this is an audio only medium. We don't have the visual aid in radio. So you have to be really descriptive and imaginative. When you are telling a story, you need to paint the picture. And obviously, one has to be an interesting storyteller, and talking in the same tone and a same pitch would definitely make any conversation boring. So it has to be, the voice modulation needs to be very good, because see, you are basically talking to millions of people out there. You're talking to the masses, but you need to make them feel that you're talking to this individual person who is sitting at home. And especially at the time of pandemic, where it was social distancing and it was lockdown and people were in isolation and they were at home, they were lonely. So basically, you are talking to that individual who is sitting alone and tune into your radio. You need to address to that particular individual. And definitely, when you're choosing any topic to talk on, maybe be it an RJ talk, or any story that you're telling or any topic that you're talking about, it's very important that the RJ must have the knowledge of the topic. So for knowledge, you need to do proper research on the topic, get your facts and data and figure correct. And then an RJ needs to be friendly and spontaneous, because no matter how much you have planned, how much you have written, they definitely write their scripts, they write pointers for them. But sometimes any news can come, anything can come that has happened very recently, and it's like you need to basically tell your audience about anything, and you need to be spontaneous. You need to just you speak that way, extempore communication. That capacity needs to be there. That is a very essential quality which is required for a radio presenter, because you need to be friendly and spontaneous. I mean, it should organically come to you. It should not be, it should not look as if you have mug it up and you're telling it to the listeners. It should feel very organic, that it is coming to you. Now, after telling all of these qualities that are required to be a radio presenter, and I'm addressing to all my lovely audiences and education leaders and academicians who are listening to this live talk, there is an opportunity that MIT University is creating for school and college students out there. I mean, we are basically organizing an MIT Youth Fest, which is a global festival. Now, this festival is doing a program which is globally from 11th to 14th March, and MIT School of Communication, Lucknow, is doing an event which is Global RJ Hunt. So I thought, what better day to launch this event than on World Radio Day? I mean, for all the students out there, who are school students from class 9 to 12, and college students in UG, PG, or doing their PhD, even scholars, they can basically ignite their RJ within them, and they can participate in this RJ hunt, and they can register at mit.edu/AYFSE, and they can submit. The last date for the entry submission is 10th of March. So before, and they can send their entries, they can record a talk of 1 to 2 minutes, and they can send their entries to ASCO events at lko.mit.edu. That's it from my side. All the questions are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Alisha. I was very keenly listening to your talk. You have so well explained, how from the very basic radio, it has come to such a level where, every phone has a radio. You find it in the cars, you find it everywhere, and it's so easy to tune in. You don't have to download any apps or something. And you also talked about podcasts, which are a fashion now with the youth, and it's such a good way to express your views when you are not getting a platform, when people are not offering it to you, so you can start something of your own. So thank you so much. And yes, I would like to ask you a question on behalf of my audience, that
Please.
so radio as such, when we talk about it, um, do you think that radio, as much as the visual medium, or social media, does it have a much brighter future?
See, I would probably like to answer this with a theory of Marshall McLuhan. He has always said that these mediums, the most interesting thing about mass mediums is that they have existed and coexisted. So, say for example, today, you have smartphones and you have tablets, and we say that people are accessing newspapers on phones and tablets. But can we say that newspapers are becoming obsolete? No. I mean, when say my father-in-law or your father is sitting there and they want to access to the newspaper, the feel of that newspaper is invaluable for them. So similarly, yes, I would say the platform might change. Silent platform might change. There could be a shift. Say for example, people were listening radios on this on the radio devices initially. Now the radio is there in their smartphones. They are accessing online radio, but I feel it is going to stay. It is here to exist. I mean, the medium might change slightly, but yeah, the mode of communication it's a very powerful tool, and I feel it's here to stay.
Thank you. And one last question. Overall, radio, just like you have influencers, is radio a very big influence all over the world in creating opinions?
It is, because radio, the most important objective of radio is said to be, the public service. That is even today. in the era of commercial radio and online radio. It focuses on basically, doing public service in terms of creating awareness, in terms of talking about issues. Say, for example, even commercial radios, they have a responsibility of doing a certain amount of CSR in talking about social issues. So they
Yeah.
are, because they are connecting to the masses at various levels, be it through a broadcast, be it through commercial radio. That is why, when there was this very popular incident where on radio, RJ Naved, he's a very popular RJ. He said that, when we are on radio, people are listening to us, but then they're not actually seeing us. So, that kind of gives us a feeling that, we're invisible to them. I mean, the voice is there, but my face is not there. And that is why most of these RJs are connecting through social media platforms. They have their Facebook pages, and they are telling listeners to, access to go onto my Facebook page, to follow me on Instagram, to follow me on, on YouTube. I mean, they are making their YouTube channels. So I personally feel that this is an era of convergence, where all mediums would be coming together and working for a broader goal.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, by naming RJ Naved, we have such influential and RJs like Malishka. I mean, she made it to the movies. So like it's like that. And Nilesh Pandey, when you're talking about when you're telling stories, and you
Yeah.
have to change the story. So I remember Nilesh Pandey, who used to come late night and narrate stories, and they were such his imagination and the way he said it with voice modulation. So it was very very engrossing. So thank you so much, Alisha, once again for sparing time and coming on our show. We hope to see you on this very same platform with some other topic related to what you're doing, the Mascom thing. So thank you once again, and a
It was
happy World Radio Day.
It was lovely to be here. It was lovely to connect to all the audiences. And it is always an honor to come and speak for Dr. Sunita Gandhi, I mean, who is pioneer in education leaders, and she has made this beautiful platform, I must say. And it's amazing to connect. I shall be very happy to connect again sometime. And a very happy World Radio Day to everybody out there.
Thank you so much.
You're
So, for
welcome.
my audience, good evening for now. But then again, stay tuned in. We have a lot of sessions coming up, which are as interesting as we have been doing till now. So, stay tuned in for another live session on Getty Talks. Thank you once again.